Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper, and I'm here today with Juan Andre, the CEO of Rebank. Good evening in your case, Juan. How you doing?
Good evening. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I know you're coming to us from London tonight, so it's what's it like in London today?
It's been warm the last few days. Nice weather for cycling and walks in the evening, actually. So it's not bad.
Oh, good. So can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Um, yeah, I guess prior to starting Rebank, I spent quite a lot of time in financial services or fintech, doing things around payments and mostly retail stuff, payments and credit cards and fraud systems and all of that. So that kind of lent itself quite nicely to what we were focusing on. But originally, I mean, I'm from Venezuela, born and raised there. So I traveled a lot with my family in sort of when I was young and yeah, settled in the UK, and I've been here ever since, really, apart from my time in my brief stint in the US last year.
When did you move to the UK?
I was 8 when we moved here, staying mostly around the south coast. I don't know if you know it. And then yeah, ending up in London, and yeah, it's like I do. When I was in the US, I definitely missed London a bit, but also I did definitely have a great sort of vibe with California and all of that area. I love it as well.
Yes, and I can attest to that since I live there. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employee and an employer?
As an employee, very limited. I probably had quite a negative view and experience of remote employment as an employee, because the companies I'd worked at never really had set us up to succeed in remote. But as an employer, that changed. We were always supportive, but secretly I was unsure, what it would be like. Well, the thing that happened with us anyway is that our first employee, Luke, who's a close friend of Simon, who I founded the company with, he said after doing YC, I'm moving to Australia, and we were like, yeah, cool, that's fine. So we really just had to adapt. So I think little things like tooling, we had to think about that at a very, very early stage, and that kind of helped us out when it came to lockdown, COVID, and all of that. But yeah, we were sort of flung into it, I suppose, from as a sort of employer. But the way we sort of rationalized it to ourselves back then was that we had very high trust in Luke because we'd known him for so long. So for him to be 12 hours sort of away was fine. But we'd want to be more selective with other with remote workers. But again, after COVID, where we're all remote, it's really opened my eye. Well, it's shown me what remote work really is, and actually, yeah, I'm definitely more for it now than I used to be.
And when did you start Rebank?
We started Rebank in 2018, at the beginning of 2018. What we're doing wasn't possible before then, really. So we, well, I don't know if you can hear that.
No, we're good.
Okay. So yeah, we started in 2018 because of new regulation, and the activities leading up to that really were just a lot of research around the problem, the sort of insight that I found at my previous employer. But we went the whole first year, Simon and I, sort of bootstrapping it, and that was an active. We were deliberate about that because we saw the sort of shape that the industry was taking and how things were moving, and we realized it was best to wait for the right time to really sort of go into a sort of faster mode. But yeah, then in November, did the interviews, we got in to YC, and then yeah, everything changed really.
Yeah, very good. So what do you think is the future of remote employment? And now that you've been doing it for a while, what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
Well, I think about it more as just employment in general. What is the future of that? And I've certainly not spent a great amount of time thinking about it, but what I can see around me is that this generation and this sort of global event has definitely accelerated our move towards a more remote workforce. Now, I think the winners are going to be the smaller companies that can more easily adapt. And by adapt, to me, it all boils down to tooling. If you have the right tools in place, then moving from synchronous to asynchronous conversations and decision making is just so much simpler. So I suppose the future is just more of what we're seeing, and I imagine there's going to be a whole wave of tools that help businesses do that kind of work, that help businesses make decisions across multiple time zones. And in fact, that is one of the things that we can do because of the way that we help businesses control access to their banks and at the most granular level. So yeah, there's going to be, I think, new plays in multiple industries around this, which is cool.
Yeah, cool. So what is the story behind Rebank? What services do you offer? Who are your customers? All those things.
Yeah. The story, I guess it starts with a very painful experience, or a very salient experience. I was at the last company I was in, which was a travel startup. They were growing 50% year on year, and I came in to basically do international expansion within payments. What I saw in the finance team, because it was the first time I'd worked in a finance team, was just for actual frustration, real anger and frustration from the accountants and finance people around banking interfaces and tools. The tools that they were using were just not fit for purpose. And this was interesting because if you think about product teams, engineering teams in particular, marketing teams, they all have tools which have basically automated all the routine. But it seemed like finance teams were still living off Excel and really bad accounting tools. So yeah, this is what started a bit of a hunt and sort of a research session with different people, different companies. And Simon joined me in that. And sort of where did we end up after a few months? There were three things that we realized. The first two were just how much business banking sucks today. That was more true in 2016, 17. But when we talked about companies, they told us two dimensions in which they are negatively affected by their banks. The first is that payments are unnecessarily expensive or complicated to manage and send as you scale. And the second is that the interfaces that you use to find simple data are unnecessarily clunky and slow. But there's actually a third insight, which a lot of fintechs don't really get in business banking. The third one is that despite these first two problems, businesses hate switching bank accounts. So very few finance directors are going to move 20 million into like a mobile banking account. So taking all of these things, that's how we started the concept of Rebank, which is essentially a front end for all your business banks. So we take whatever existing finance stack you have and we augment that. We connect your banks, we connect your accounting tool, and we make payments so much simpler than using payments with your incumbent bank, for example. We also let you send money at the lowest possible exchange rate if you handle international payments. So yeah, and we do all of that with one interface, as opposed to having 2, 3, 4, depending on how many banks you use. And that's a bit about us. So who are we focusing on right now? Our customers range from companies between 2 people all the way up to 80 people, sending anywhere from $15,000 a month to $20 million a month. So yeah.
So would you say you save them money or time or both?
We can do both. We start off with a free tier, right? And that free tier gives you just a much better experience that makes your day, if you deal with finance on a day-to-day basis, it makes your day that much more interesting, maybe, because you're spending less time managing clunky banking interfaces.
Mm.
That's free, and that saves you time. But then what we see some companies doing, and one of the things we're optimizing, of course, is that they then start moving money through Rebank. So when they start moving money through us, that's where we can really save, really have an impact on their bottom line, especially if they send funds internationally, because a lot of banks in Europe and the US like to add very fat margins onto those corporate payments. Now, we charge a monthly fee because we want to be transparent. So you get all of that. It's in a sort of SaaS package, I guess, if you want to call it that, which is far more straightforward to understand, I would say, than being paid 20 cents per ACH and then 50 for the platform and whatever else. Banks come up with all sorts of ways to hide fees, but yeah.
Cool. So you guys started out remote, it sounded like. Is there anything you had to do it? Because you said you never really worked remote before that. So since your co-founder went right to Australia, what did you do to bridge that gap?
Yeah, well, Simon and I started in London, and then Luke joined. So yeah, when Luke went to Australia, we just had to think about how we're going to make this work, and that starts with, I guess, like finding the right tools that help us deal with the fact that we're sleeping whilst Luke is awake. So all that sort of knowledge management and task management, we get that from, there are multiple tools out there now, but Notion, Airbase, Basecamp, they're all options that companies use today. So we start with that, but then we build on top of it. We build our own processes around that. And we had to build our processes around right, what do we want Luke to do tonight? Because we'd be asleep. And I guess that was that sort of fast tracked us to be more to just be sort of better at managing that. To me, it's all about asynchronous communication ultimately. When you're going remote, it's okay to do some synchronous stuff, but you want to push as much of it to asynchronous as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit. So, I mean, you already were remote, but did the pandemic cause any challenges or roadblocks that you didn't expect with either you or with your customers?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we had to, some customers were affected more than others, and we had to revisit sort of our roadmap slightly. Payments became more important. Some of the other features sort of felt less interesting to companies all of a sudden. Companies became, I suppose, more selective about what was really going to drive value. So yeah, all of that, we reacted to all of that. But frankly, I think at the time we were maybe 6 or 7, and I think the biggest barrier is the mental one. The barrier of going back to your bedroom, to your living room, and sort of figuring out how you're going to turn that sort of space of fun and relaxation into a workspace. And I think that's the thing that takes ages to figure out. We all jumped on Zoom. We had Slack and everything else, but yeah, to be honest, I would say that it's only been in the last few weeks where everyone's really sort of settling in now to this new way of working. And we're thinking, right, okay, how can we optimize this even more? How can we, make sure that we don't have to keep sort of sending each other Slack messages to remind ourselves about this and that. Yeah. So yeah, that's how we.
It looks like you're in your kitchen. I'm actually in my dining room. I'm actually not in the middle of a lake in northern Italy. So I think we've all adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly not windy considering you're outside. And
I know. Yeah, well, I don't have that much hair anymore. So not much to blow around. So
yeah, I'm in my sort of kitchen slash living room. I actually had to move partway through the pandemic, which was a blessing in disguise because there was a bit more space here, a bit more light. So yeah, that helped a little bit.
Yeah. So finally, there are companies like Gabriel that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups. how important do you think this will be going forward for companies like yourself that need to hire the right talent and need to hire it in a hurry?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about outsourcing
Mm-hmm.
or um, with outsourcing, I think initially I'm always reluctant to sort of, for very early stage companies, I think outsourcing can be, unless their focus is definitely not tech, then outsourcing should always be a final consideration. But I think now, for example, for us, where we're getting the stage we're getting to of 10 people growing to maybe 12 or 15, now we have more discrete pieces of work that we could say, hey, this is a sort of something we can define very clearly and sort of test it with a an outsourced team and see how we do. That is easier as you get further along. There are companies that do outsourcing from the beginning, but we just weren't one of them. But in terms of hiring, yeah, we've yet to see how that's going to change. I assume it's going to. I suppose we're now comfortable hiring sort of 1 or 2 time zones across on either
Mm-hmm.
side, and we don't know what it's like to hire people in Germany or in New York if we go that far. So yeah, I mean, having support there would be pretty cool. So we'll have to start thinking about that. But yeah, I think those are 2 things that we think about at the moment.
Very cool. So, Juan, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been very interesting. And I wish you have a good night. I know it's dinner time there in London, so enjoy your dinner and have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.